A few years ago, betting on a football game was a crime in almost every state. Today, you can do it from your couch, on your phone, in most of the country. So what changed? Here's the strange part. It wasn't a new law about gambling. It was a Supreme Court case about something most people have never heard of: whether Washington is allowed to boss the states around. Rewind to 2017. If you wanted to legally bet on a game, you basically had one option: fly to Nevada. Everywhere else, it was banned, not by the states themselves, by the federal government. One national law had frozen the entire country in place for 25 years. That law was PASPA, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, passed in 1992. In plain English, it did one blunt thing. It told the states they were not allowed to legalize sports betting. A handful of places that already had it were grandfathered in, Nevada most of all. Everyone else was locked out. Why pass it? The pro leagues in Congress worried that betting would tempt players to fix games, and that gambling would spread state by state, so they used federal muscle to slam the door. And to keep it shut, they aimed the law directly at the states themselves. Hold on to that. Aiming a federal law at the states is exactly where this whole thing eventually breaks. Now meet the underdog of this story, New Jersey. By the 2000s, Atlantic City's casinos were bleeding, losing to competition, losing jobs. Sports betting looked like a lifeline. So in 2011, New Jersey voters went to the ballot box and said, yes, let us do this. There was just one problem. PASPA said they couldn't. So the biggest names in sports, the NCAA, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NHL, sued New Jersey to stop it. Yes, the same leagues that today run betting ads every commercial break. Back then, they went to court to kill it. And at first, New Jersey lost. Badly. The court said the state's new law authorized sports betting, and PASPA flatly forbade that. Case closed. Most states would have given up. New Jersey found a loophole, and it turned out to be a constitutional time bomb. Here's the move. New Jersey stopped trying to authorize betting. Instead, in 2014, it simply repealed its own ban. It just deleted the state rule against sports betting and stepped back. Not, we permit this. More like, we're no longer the ones stopping you. And that tiny distinction cracked the whole case wide open. Because now the question wasn't really about gambling at all. It was this: can the federal government force a state to keep its own law on the books, a law the state wants to erase? Can Washington reach into a state capital and say, that rule stays, whether you like it or not? To answer that, you have to understand how power is split in this country. The whole American system runs on a division called federalism. Some powers belong to Washington. Everything else is left to the states. The 10th Amendment says it plainly. Powers not handed to the federal government are reserved to the states. And out of that split comes a rule with a clunky name and a huge punch: the anti-commandeering doctrine. The idea: Congress can pass its own laws, but it cannot grab the steering wheel of a state government and drive. It can't turn a state legislature into its puppet, ordering it to pass, keep, or enforce the rules Washington wants. This isn't a new idea. The court built it over decades. In one case, Congress tried to force states to take legal ownership of radioactive waste. The court said no, you can't command a state like that. In another, it tried to make local sheriffs run federal background checks. Same answer: the federal government can't conscript state officials to do its work. Two clear warnings. PASPA ignored both. So, picture the test the court uses. If a federal law tells a state government what it must do, that's commandeering, not allowed. And here's the twist New Jersey spotted. Telling a state what it's forbidden to undo is the exact same thing. Either way, Washington's hand is on the state's controls. By the time this fight climbed to the Supreme Court, New Jersey had a new governor, Phil Murphy, so the case picked up his name. On one side, the state and every gambler and casino rooting for it. On the other, the sports leagues backed by the federal government. The question in front of the 9 justices was deceptively simple. Was PASPA telling the states what they could do, or commandeering them? In 2018, the court answered, this is commandeering, and it's unconstitutional. By a vote of 7-2, the justices struck the command down. Congress, they said, had crossed the line. It didn't regulate betting itself. It ordered the states not to. The heart of it was one elegant point. A federal command that says, states, you must keep this ban, is no different from one that says, states, you must pass this ban. Both put Washington in the driver's seat of a state government. And the Constitution doesn't allow that. The distinction the whole law rested on simply vanished. Now, here's the nuance that matters, and almost every headline skipped it. The court did not say Congress is powerless over sports betting. Congress absolutely could regulate betting itself, even ban it nationwide, using its own authority. That's called preemption. What it can't do is make the states do the banning for it. Do it yourself, or don't, but don't commandeer. There was one more wrinkle. Courts usually try to save the good parts of a law and cut only the bad. But here, by a closer 6-3 vote, the justices decided the unconstitutional core was too tangled into the rest to pull out cleanly. So, PASPA didn't get trimmed. It fell, all of it, and with it, the 25-year freeze. What happened next was almost instant. Within weeks, states that had been waiting rushed to legalize. New Jersey took its first legal sports bet that same summer. Then it snowballed, state after state, year after year. The scale is staggering. From essentially one state, legal sports betting spread to most of the country in just a few years. Dozens of states, plus mobile apps that put a sports book in every pocket. Americans now legally wager well over $100 billion on sports every year. A market that barely existed became one of the fastest growing in the country. And remember the leagues that sued to stop all this? They flipped completely. Today the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, they sign official betting partnerships, run odds on their broadcasts, and take the money. The thing they went to the Supreme Court to kill became one of their biggest revenue streams. But here's why this case matters far beyond gambling. Murphy didn't just free up betting. It supercharged a rule about the balance of power between two governments sharing one country. Anti-commandeering is now one of the sharpest limits on what Washington can force the states to do, about anything. And this is the part that surprises people across the political spectrum. The same doctrine that freed New Jersey's casinos is invoked by causes on the left and the right. States that refuse to help enforce federal immigration rules lean on it. So, do states that legalized marijuana while it's still banned federally? So, do states pushing back on federal gun rules? Supporters of each say the same thing. Washington can't force us to carry out its policy. It's the same principle, pointed in every direction. Which gets at the real tension the case lives inside. We have two levels of government, both claiming real authority, stacked on the same land. Federalism is the constant negotiation between them, and anti-commandeering is one of the few hard walls the states can put up. So, was striking down PASPA a good thing? That's where honest people split. Supporters of the ruling say this is federalism working exactly as designed. Let each state decide, and let states be the laboratories of democracy, each one testing policies the rest of the country can learn from. Critics say a patchwork of 50 different rules invites a race to the bottom, and that rapid legalization spread gambling and its harms faster than anyone was ready for. Both of those can be true at once. And that harm side is real and worth naming plainly. Legal betting brought states new tax revenue, but also what researchers and gambling helplines have flagged as a rise in problem gambling, which is why most states now fund those helplines and set their own limits and rules. The court-settled WHO gets to decide. It didn't settle whether the decision is wise. That part is still being argued. So, is this the final word? Not necessarily. Because of that preemption point, Congress could still write its own national rules for sports betting tomorrow. Age limits, integrity standards, anything within its power. It just has to do the work itself, not draft the states to do it. So far, it mostly hasn't. The door Murphy left open is still standing wide. Step back and watch the whole arc. 1992. Washington freezes sports betting nationwide. The 2010s, New Jersey fights, loses, and pivots. 2018, the court says Washington overreached, and the freeze shatters. A quarter century of federal control, undone by a fight over who's really in charge. So, the next time you see a betting ad during a game, remember what actually put it there. Not a sudden change of heart about gambling, a ruling about the limits of federal power, one that now shapes fights far bigger than sports. Whether that shift is good or bad, you get to judge. But at least now you know what it was really about. That's how sports betting went from banned to everywhere. Not through a gambling law, but through the oldest question in American government. Who's in charge, Washington or the states? Know how the power is split, and the news starts to make a lot more sense. Now you know.